Sorry. Good morning. Top of the day.
Thank you. For the record, Ellen Taylor.
Wait a minute. Are we? Oh, we're live. Welcome back to Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. Today we are pivoting to economic development, and we have a new draft, draft 1.3 of our economic development bill, and we have our counselor and one of our key witnesses to kick us off. So the 1.3 will be posted on our website momentarily. And Ellen, we welcome you back. And Nicole, we welcome you on Zoom. It's good to see you. I have a money question for you. But let's start with Ellen.
Sure. Thank you. For the record, Ellen Taylor, Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund. Thanks for having me back. Thank you, Madam Chair, and to Rick for making some fine tunings on the language of this bill. I'll just speak to those sections of the bill that we had come in and talked with you about before, right, as opposed to the whole bill itself.
I think that's good, and it's
so looking at section 2,
right.
Expanding services for small business. As a reminder, this grew out of our Small Business Wednesday conversation with you all on January 29th. You heard testimony a couple of weeks ago from folks that are listed here in this draft. Under section 2, it provides some funding, additional funding for the Vermont Law and Graduate School Public Education Clinic, which is subsection A, which Nicole Thorne is if you have a question, provides $350,000 to the Professionals of Color Network.
And just tag for the committee. These are blended amounts of both the governor's ask and what's in the governor's budget and what we might want to ask, given that we know that budget is constrained and that we want to further support our small businesses and want to extend our resource ability. I believe. I mean, that's at least where we're beginning with this bill.
Correct.
In terms of a value point of view.
Yeah, the Professional Color Network are in the governor's recommend for $250,000 as one time. Right. This would bump it up to $350,000.
Right. This is an addition. So I have developed a chart. I'm in the process of developing a chart with what's in the budget, what's additional ask, what the total ask is, so that we can discuss when we have committee discussion on this. I just haven't finished that.
That's fine. Subsection C is around business advising. This was to provide some additional funding, an increase of $300,000 above the governor's recommend, which would expand the ability of the Vermont Small Business Development Center to support more small businesses over the course of the year. And so then in subsection D, which is there's some yellow changes that Rick kindly made. This, you may recall, was a guide, a resource guide for small businesses that the Mieko Ozeki from the Vermont Women Solopreneurs were here to talk about that. There's a collaborative of multiple organizations that did survey of solo entrepreneurs, very, very small businesses, to find out what they needed to know, what would they find most helpful so that they could advance their businesses. They came up with this recommendation of this one-time spend on a guide. The issue is that the collaborative is not a standalone organization. And so the request was, how could those funds flow from the general fund to this project? So the current change in language would put $100,000 to the Sustainable Jobs Fund, but we wouldn't do any of that $100,000. We would immediately contract that with the group that would be producing the guide. So it's really just a vehicle to be able to support that project.
Yes, and just to remind our new members, we do this a lot with ACCD. A lot of our money for VHFA, for example, is all goes through ACCD.
Right. So it would be a grant agreement that the Sustainable Jobs Fund would have with ACCD, and then we would contract with this collaborative for the web development work, for the resource guide, all of that. They would project manage it. We would definitely contract it. But there's a lot of players involved. And so you just felt it would make it a lot easier, more fluid to be able to do it this way. And then language saying that the guide will be completed before the end of 2026.
Right.
And then,
Microbusiness.
we've got some funding in there, to support, the micro business, program, which, run out of the Vermont Community Action, partnerships. There's 5 community action agencies around the state, and they provide,
Right.
business advising support to small businesses.
And this is in some ways, our smallest businesses,
Correct.
first time entrepreneurs, new Americans, bunch of people that are
Yeah.
really, this is really the beginning.
Right, for a while.
And this is only an additional ask of 87, which will be on our little chart I've got. And the new bid,
And so then, letter F, you may recall that there was a subsection 6 before, which the Sale Jobs Fund had requested some minor, statute language change to the Vermont training program to enable small business owners with less than 20 employees to be able to also qualify for Vermont training program dollars. In communication with Commissioner Goldstein, and also Auditor Hopper, there was a feeling that the training program was not the right vehicle for that kind of training. We had spoken with you at the January session about the importance of seeing business owners who are less than 20 employees as also really working in their business. And even though they're owners, they're really working in their business alongside their employees, and they too need training and support. So the workaround, so that request of statute training of the Vermont training program has been struck from this newest version. And instead, the recommend is to add a one-time 120,000 and have the funds go to the Vermont Small Business Development Center, because they do business advising, and then they would contract with the Sale Jobs Fund, the Vermont Manufacturing Center, and any other key organizations that provide this type of business coaching. And so they would manage the funds and just enable more businesses to be served with a higher order coaching than what the Small Business Development Center normally would do. The Small Business Development Center, just as a reminder, Linda Rossi, the director, said that typically the average amount of time that their business advisors can work with small businesses is about 6 hours. Whereas, for instance, our coaching program is somewhere in the order of 80 to 120 hours. So it's just a different type of support for businesses that are farther along their path of development.
and I hate to say this, but I will. If more early stage business owners, as they develop their businesses, were well trained, I think we would have a lot fewer labor issues on down the pipe. I think the better trained our managers and business owners are, the fewer problems we have later that we have to resolve in legislation.
Are we going to get a fiscal note?
Yeah, I have
Okay.
all the money pieces are going to be, I've pulled them all together and we're gonna look at them together.
So we're gonna have a total amount.
Yes,
Okay,
and I have one for each section. I just didn't have a chance to finish it last night.
okay.
So I don't think-
Fiscal note.
I don't think we need a fiscal note on it. It's just looking at each piece and which we have, and finding and reviewing what was in the governor's ask and what would be a choice of ours to make additionally above that, and a total ask.
Are you like DIYing a spreadsheet is what you're saying, or you have something from JFO?
No, I mean, it doesn't need analysis. I'm just adding them all together and putting them on a sheet so that we can look at them.
What's the total?
I haven't done it yet, but I have it right here. You can look at them. And we can, anyway, we will do that, but we're not gonna do it at this moment because I haven't finished it. But it's right here. Let's see.
I think we'll need to run that through JFO. I mean,
Yeah, I'm happy
okay,
to. I'm
okay.
just-
I didn't know if you were saying they're so low capacity.
No,
Okay.
I'm happy to do that. And Pat is gonna be here. We'll chat with Pat about putting that together for tomorrow.
Okay.
The one requested addition, if possible, on page 5, just where there's a list of services, if there's a way to simply say shall include but not be
Exclusion.
excluded, it's sort of like these are examples.
So it's usually shall include, but not limited to. Is
Yes.
that right?
Yeah, this is just to give you all a sense of the
Yeah.
type of training, which is different than, say, upskilling of individual workers. Okay. And then I would like to flip to the bottom of page 10, which is section 9. You have been interested in having a task force to address business growth and access to capital. We're supportive of this and being involved in this process. And I understand that there's been a suggested change of the executive director of Launch BP. I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and the other changes that are in yellow we're fine with as well.
Yes.
So again, the biggest changes is to strike the section that had included changes to the statute of Vermont training program, and instead provide some additional resources to support the types of businesses that are in extra need of support.
Great, questions?
Next.
All right.
Nicole, do you have anything you want to add?
I don't, but I'm here for questions if the committee has any.
So my question for you is I'm pulling together all the financial pieces of this bill, which include a lot of things that are in the governor's budget and a few things that aren't, like we know. Question for you is any of the legal center, the Small Business Legal Center's budget in the governor's budget? Or is that $300 all a new ask that we would be taking on?
I don't believe any of this is in the governor's budget. I don't believe that it's ever been in the governor's budget. It's pretty new.
Okay. Yes, and it was initially funded with
No.
$300.
That's correct. We have been funded. Actually, we worked with VTSBDC originally. They funded us a portion of our operations, and then we worked with them for Community Navigator pilot program, and that got us started with the referral program as well. And now we're currently funded on a congressionally directed spending grant, which expires next July, and we have a small contract with VTSBDC for the State Small Business Credit Initiative, which also expires around the same time.
Right, so, sorry, just say that one, the money goes through the 26 or 27?
It goes through 26. It goes, our SSBCI work goes through May 30th, 2026. Our CDS goes through June 30th, 2026.
Okay, thanks. And you have helped how many people to date? How many small business have you done today?
I think in the last 2 years or so, our numbers were up around 300 people. We had 400 intakes, around 300 that we did educational consults and or referrals for.
Right. And your hope with this is to continue that and build on it, as I recall.
That's correct. Our hope is to continue to keep that base, because we would like to continue to serve at least that many. The numbers are continuing to increase, and our volume our capacity can't handle it. So we're hoping to hopefully with this money be able to access matching grants if we can, to continue to provide our base operations funding. We're already looking around at some different applications for that, and submitted one this week actually. We're hoping to continue and to perhaps add a staff attorney position that would allow us to just continue to expand and serve more businesses. We cannot meet the volume that we're receiving. We simply cannot with our current level.
And your referrals, just remind us, the referrals come from Vermont SBDC and other small business organizations that don't have the legal expertise to solve some of these small business challenges.
Yes, that's correct. So most of our referrals come from our community partners, including VTSBDC. We work with the capstone agencies. We get a lot of micro business development program referrals. We work with really all the incubator and accelerator programs. We are actually pretty high up on the list on a Google search too. So the public are just finding us. They're coming to us. They're looking for small business legal support, and they're finding us. And that's why the volume is going up.
Right. Any questions? Sorry.
Not about any one thing. What I think we tried to do last biennium, and I don't remember us spending money on economic and workforce development because I care about funding housing. That we still looked at our priorities, and I would keep hearing from people what I thought was, you know, Senator Harrison really cares about the refugee housing money that's helping Wyndham County, et cetera. I mean, it's similar to what appropriations ends up having to do, which is hear what bubbles up for folks as their main priorities. And I'm saying this because this is going to get harder. At some point, we're going to get a box that we need to live in, or we're going to have to expand the box ourselves, which is what I tried to do last year with the property transfer tax. And Senator Kitchell didn't even really like when you come with your own revenue source, neither did Senator Cummings necessarily, but it worked in that instance because it was very closely tied and I had stayed in touch with them. So I guess I'm just wondering, when this gets difficult, do you want to have heard from us our main priority? Do we want to prioritize?
So I know you're I'm passionate about housing too. I also am passionate about economic development, and I really feel that we have heard. I've heard from a lot of small businesses, and I heard loud and clear at our Small Business Wednesday the needs that we are meeting in part for our small businesses. And I think all our work goes hand in glove. I don't, you know, I'm not sure it's not mutually exclusive, because obviously jobs relate to housing, relate to the growth in our economy here. And I think I'm hoping with the limited time we had this particular crossover, that we can support what's currently in place, support it with further resources, which we know are working. These are not new programs. These are all programs that are serving our small businesses, a whole range of small businesses. So I'm hoping that we will, with this bill, sort of underscore the importance of our small businesses and supporting them further. That's sort of what I'm hoping.
I'm not disagreeing that we should have
and I just want to finish your question,
Yeah.
which is in this bill are I've heard some questions about the convention center and some big performance spaces, which would be economic development. So we have a task force on that. We also have support for the film resource guide and the creative economy, which I know Randy is very keen on, as am I. And we've included the Arts Council budget in here. They generally just go straight to appropriations, but because we're the creative economy and we have one piece of the creative economy around us on the walls. I've heard the film piece, I've heard the convention center piece. After crossover, we're going to look at some other things. And so if there are things that aren't in here at this point, we can always add later. But this is what I'm hoping we'll do. But I've tried to. In this, I think we have tried to respond to the concerns and issues that we've heard already.
May I ask you a question? Yeah. Your phrase that you use that we'll refer to later. How do you define that later?
After crossover, okay. Because after crossover,
but before, are you looking at, in effect, amending this before it goes to the other body, or?
I'm hoping
all the money will get stripped out.
Yeah,
all the money will be stripped out. It will go to appropriation, and we know what will happen. All the money will be stripped out, and then, and that's why Andy asked. He said, "Ask for what you need. Ask for what you want. Don't be constrained, and then we'll figure it out, because we don't know what the feds. We don't know."
So we're talking about the dollars, not the substance. Is that correct?
Well, the dollars get stripped out by appropriations,
Right. We know that.
not the substance.
Yes.
I mean, sometimes they
Are you,
can.
what I'm really asking is, are you looking at changing the substance after crossover?
Not on this, but after crossover, we have opportunities to work on things that will then can be added when things come back from the House, or that can be added to things we're getting.
All right. That's I wanted to clarify.
Yeah, because I think, for example, there are a lot of issues that I know are near and dear to people that we can put. I know we're getting a big workforce development bill. The military spending piece, we could put on that and do some work on that as significantly. That's coming from the House.
Yeah.
And I know that we're getting a housing bill, so we can look at an issue I know is Keith David, which is eminent domain, and the possibility of using that in housing. I know. Well, this is a concern of David. And I am. We have opportunities to continue to work on this. This is just. As I think I said yesterday, and Keisha has always said, these are evolving conversations. Our bills are works in progress. And this is stage one, which is at least getting it so that it's actively engaged within the House. So That's what I'm hoping to accomplish with this.
I raised my hand because I want to confirm that appropriations will strip out these dollar amounts.
They generally do. They strip out
Tap
from
into the budget later on. So
any bill that has money in it, they'll strip out.
Now that we're talking, so oftentimes the housing money, we had a different philosophy that we were operating under. Does it matter to create home ownership even if it's more expensive? Does it help to create revolving loan funds because those, continue to pay for themselves? In the context of this work, I just want to have said out loud that my philosophy when things get hard and we have to have, difficult discussions about what actually gets funded is that we fund things that are working, and the chopping block, what gets left on the cutting room floor is the new things, any new things or new studies. That's just my philosophy going into the money conversation is that we are about to lose more positions, more money, more things that we care about from the federal level. And I can't responsibly support funding anything new when things that are working might be in jeopardy.
I appreciate that. And I think that's what I'm trying to thread the needle with this bill is to support the things that are working, but that could work better if we gave them more resources. And
this is not a criticism of you. I just want
I'm just trying to explain what I'm hoping that everybody's seeing in this bill is that further support the stuff that's working well. And one area that needs to work better is, I think, are things like business owners being better trained to do the job they want to succeed in. And I think that is particularly people who can't afford to go to business school or, who are learning on the job. This is a great opportunity for them. But I would agree. I think this is our moment to dream. And Andy has asked us to do to ask, because you can't add if you haven't asked, but you can edit out if we have needs. If a third of our state budget is cut, we're going to have a brutal conversation about it.
So we do have two new appropriations chairs who I have full confidence in. It just gets really hard in the last 2 weeks. I just want to make sure we've been clear about how big we're dreaming and then how much of a nightmare we are going to face with.
You used the term things that are working. And one of the things that we have absent in virtually all the bills we do is measurement to determine are they in fact working in a rigorous manner. And that's something I'm looking at developing, and I'm going to be working with Ledge Council on developing almost a standard paragraph to define how we measure what is and what is not working. We're giving money to these things, and we have anecdotal evidence of one kind or another that it's working. In some cases we have, but we don't have it in a systematic way. We don't have it
in a consistent way, I'd say. But I actually think we've heard very specifically from all of the entities that are represented in this bill. We've heard how well they're working, and we've heard facts about how well they're working and how many businesses they serve, how many people they serve. I don't fully agree with you, but I think a consistent way to measure everything is a great idea.
True.
And we don't have that in state government, period.
I know.
And that would
It's a really
be
important
a
thing to
great
think
thing.
about.
And maybe something that we could work on in this committee developing.
Well, we did have a government accountability committee.
Yeah, we did. What happened to that?
Well, we
still
issued
have
a report, and we issued a report with recommendations about how to do that.
Yeah.
And it went to the committee on government operations, where it's set. It wasn't acted on, and it's going to be back this year.
Oh, good, because it continues.
After. Because there's a desperate need. And people in the agencies will always say it's working because they're the ones who are getting the money.
Right.
I never have had an agency come in to tell us that this isn't working and it isn't working well, even when it isn't.
That's true. Although in this bill, because I'd love to just bring it back to this bill, we had a proposal that began with the Vermont Training Program. The Vermont Training Program works really well, has its own measures, does where it, and to her credit, it was clearly not going to fit in that peg. And so we pivoted and worked, because I think this need of business owner training is a big one in this state. And, so I wanted to shout out to Ellen who pivoted and figured out a way to make this work with the right support under the right umbrella. Because the training program seemed like a natural, but wasn't for a bunch of reasons. So that is a case of where they said, no, this won't work. So, any other questions on these sections? Because we're going to have the pro tem come in 3 minutes to talk about the Irish proposal, the Irish Commission. And well, it's near and dear to his heart. Rick, do you want?
I guess, well,
Yeah.
we have a couple
Yeah.
more minutes of discussion, and Ellen, thank you for that, brevity. So we have the opportunity to have committee
Yeah.
discussion before, with the big committee discussion.
Yeah.
Time. I know I always worry about this. I'm sure Senator Perchlik does, and Senator Kitchell and I used to talk about this all the time. We worry about the people who don't know how to tell us what's important. And in my mind, the more we say, this is near and dear to somebody's heart, or this is, special, in some way, I just try to talk about that with the caveat that we should try to remain extremely accessible to people who don't know how this works. I mean, for example, Habitat for Humanity and housing conversation, Home Share Vermont. So I'm just trying to create some parallels where we acknowledge that it gets extremely difficult to be heard once you're at the level of Senate appropriations. And so we should try to make ourselves, really available so no one can say they never got their opportunity to share in economic development.
Absolutely. And we have been pretty open, and we're here, and we have no staff filtering our emails. We see all those emails, and we are open to people being in touch. So I've just done a quick total on this bill, and including a lot of governors asked, like the downtown tax credits and the Arts Council, which are already there, but they're here just because they are our jurisdiction. So we have and I will type this all up for you because I haven't, is $8,581.
Are you including
$689.
5 million or 2 million?
No,
The 5 million instead of the jump from 3 to 5.
I'm including the ask in this
Okay.
current budget.
So it's 6 million
It's 5 million total.
new.
No, it's 5 million total.
Well, okay, but the 5 million is the tax credits awarded, but we already award 3 million. This is why we need JFO, because
Well, yes and no. I mean, the ask for this year is 5 million. So we did 3 million in the past, and you're right, it's an additional 2, but it's already been asked. But I'm happy we will work on this.
yeah, it's just like how how we measure it in the same way, so we're not speaking a different language
Right,
at the end.
got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so but I've got it. It's here. I just have to get it with JFO together.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just, so anyway. There we are, and our pro tem is on, I get his way, I hope.
He's right here.
Thank you very much.
Oh, hi, pro tem, Ellen.
You
thank
just lost
Thank you
time.
very much.
You just look like one.
Thank you.
So you.
Phil, come join us.
Morning.
Good morning.
Where are our Irish goods here?
Where's our flag?
You want-
So.
Full disclosure, I am Irish in part, along with 4 or 5 other things.
Either you're from Rome, New York.
Yes, well, I'm Italian by upbringing. So,
I like that.
Well, I would have us turn to section 6, and I would welcome our pro tem, Philip Baruth. Welcome, it's good to have you.
thank you.
And we have incorporated the Irish Trade Commission into this bill. It's now in section 6. And please tell us why you care so much about it.
Sure. So, this goes back to a visit that we
Just
had.
identifiers.
Yeah, Senator Phil Baruth, Chittenden Central District. And, I had a visit, that is, the Senate had a visit from one of the senators from Ireland, last biennium, to promote this and to promote trade between Vermont and Ireland. And, so I think in general, if we can increase our international trade, we should do that. It just seems to me a no-brainer. But this one had already had some spade work done in the House. Representative Casey had already been working with his counterparts in Ireland, and they had a framework together. They passed it out of the House last year, didn't make it out of government operations last year. But it seemed ready to go to me. So what you're looking at is the actual language that came out of the House. And a couple of features of, I think, reflected their discussions about how many, for instance, the governor appoints, how many the committee on committees appoints, et cetera, and the procedures involved. I guess just by way of concluding an overall summary, I would say that I think one of the concerns that was expressed in government operations last year was that it was developing a relationship with one country, but not a policy, broad-based policy that covered other countries. And that may come, you know, in the wake of this. But it seems to me, given what we have developed already between Vermont and Ireland and you know, simpatico nature of that relationship, it seems like a good time to do this.
Questions?
Happy to answer questions.
Yeah, because I know Randy has a modest concern that you raised before about funding.
Well, I had a little bit of a concern in which the question becomes one of whether the members of the commission are receiving something through sources that are not direct, indirect by this particular funding mechanism, whether that creates any potential conflicts of interest. And that would be something that I think we want Ledge Council perhaps to advise us on.
Yeah.
And I think that section G that you were concerned about on page 9, which is it's authorized to raise funds through direct.
And again, I don't have any problem about commission. I think commission is an excellent idea. In my private work, I've done a lot of work. I've been to Ireland many times on economic development issues. And to me, it was a standout in Europe in terms of their approach to it versus most of the other countries in Europe, including the UK. And so I'm very, very positive about this opportunity. But one of the things I like the most about Ireland's approach is they would tell you all the things that they had. You know, we have tax credits and we have this and we have that, and we have an educated workforce, but tell us what you want. And that has stuck with me because nobody else asks, well, what do you actually want?
Yeah.
And we don't do that either. I thought it was very, very effective. And I know in our case, it added 5,000 jobs in Ireland, which helped our international business very significantly.
That's great.
And just to speak to the private nature of funding, or the possibility of private nature of the funding, I know there are other states that use that model. This is different. And again, this is the House's language, which I present without any private interest in it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't pay the members of the commission in the way that we normally do. Which is a difference, and I assume was one that solved some problem they had on the other side about how to fund it. So I'm not wed to the private funding. If this committee decided to swap in the normal per diem and compensation structure, that would be completely fine with me. I can't imagine that there would be a corrupting element to the private funding, but whatever the committee's comfortable with.
Well, I had two thoughts. You know, one, the more I've thought about that concern, the more I thought that maybe we should go in the other direction, and hear me out, where we standardize these partnerships in such a way that private funds can be incorporated and solicited, but it's really clear where those sources, what sources those are, and any linkages that they might have. Because I think a lot of us face the concern on our own of, do we accept a trip to Taiwan or, you know, Ireland, and who funds that trip? And if the state was helping us standardize that, then we could be making better decisions. And frankly, if our Canadian relations people want to start paying for more of our Canadian relations stuff, like I don't see that as a bad thing right now. So I guess in my mind, it was, can we look in the future at making all of them a little more flexible, but then a little more transparent? So that's one thought that I had, and I thought we'd comment. And that second thought is just giving you or others more of an opportunity, I think, as Senator Brock was saying, to articulate that there's certain countries that I think are special in their parallels to Vermont, that they have, large agrarian bases. They really think about community wealth building, which they have an office of community wealth building in Ireland. They look at economic development from how are we going to make our folks better off, and how do we make sustainable tech work? I think of places like Japan, which even as an Indian, I thought, my relationship gravity goes toward Japan because they're just similar in how they have slow growth patterns and ways of really trying to absorb the capital into their communities. So those are just my two thoughts that I'd allow you to comment on, being like a tiny part Irish myself too, and actually growing up Irish with very little Irish heritage and an Irish pub.
Yeah.
With an Indian.
Yeah, an Indian and Jewish owner, but the Jews wandered through Ireland for a generation.
Well, the transparency piece, I think, is always to the good. So if this could be strengthened with some sort of disclosure language, that would be great. If it's a future structure for these sorts of partnerships, I think that should also include real transparency language. Honestly, if we're trying to promote trade and we're trying to build the relationship, it should be transparency on both sides. And I think, hey, that makes sure that we're not complicating or corrupting the relationship.
So elsewhere in this bill, we also fund the trade office, a shared piece of a trade office for Asia and Europe, which we've had a very successful trade office and consultation, but partnership with a consulting firm in Canada, which has resulted in more business growth and partnership, Canada and US. And that's just at the moment embedded in the governor's budget and isn't part of this ask. But what the ask is to build on that success by doing a trade office for Asia and Europe. And it's a modest ask, and it's $350 here in the bill. So I think that this already has an element of that in it. But I think if we can add a disclosure piece and build on the transparency, and also go to Keisha's concern, interest in figuring out a model. Maybe this commission, as it begins, could work on a model for future commissions that could partner with other countries.
I'm sure Massachusetts has a lot of oversight, and I think they have this council, and I'm sure.
Yeah.
All of the
I'm trying to remember the list. I have an email with the list
Of the other countries that they have.
of the other states that have.
I think there are quite a few.
Yeah.
Yes, that senator was on a mission,
Yeah. Right.
but before him, I think they it's there.
Yeah.
Great. Terrific. Any further questions for our pro tem? Terrific.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. Come on.
Madam Chair, I wish you luck getting all your bills out.
Thank you. We're working hard on getting this one out. Thank you for your help. This is
Yeah.
terrific.
And I'll go to judiciary if I can.
Great. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Very helpful. I think we have the treasurer's office here to talk about this, section 6, and to talk about other things.
Good morning, everyone. Ashlyn Doyon, Director of Policy with the Treasurer's Office. I have not seen, I'm looking at S78. Is that language in its entirety?
That
Thinking about
language at the moment
incorporating?
in its entirety is right here.
Okay, perfect. Then I won't switch tabs around.
But for your future, it is section 6 in a draft 1.3.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sorry.
Like 7 and
Oh, sorry, 6, 7, and 8, right. That
Section
it
6 is
begins
the
at-
trade. Are we talking about the trade?
Oh, I meant, sorry, yeah.
There's another
it's the-
treasurer committee in the draft of the bill as well, or
Yeah.
as the treasurer's on a member of the capital.
Yes, capital, but let's talk about, which one would you like to talk about first?
Let's talk about Ireland first, because that's where you just were. So the Vermont Ireland Trade Commission, as proposed, has the state treasurer as a member of the commission, as well as administrative support being provided by the treasurer's office. Treasurer Pichek was asked last year when similar legislation was introduced if he would be willing to do this work in the treasurer's office. He said that he would be. I think that that is a result of his own affinity for his Irish heritage, as well as an interest in innovative ways to support economic development in Vermont. We do not think that it would take any additional resources from our office to serve the commission, largely staff support. And we think that we can do that with the staff that we currently have. Happy to answer any questions folks might have.
I am only grateful.
I think to take back this conversation we've been having about if we could start to use this as a model for transparency around the private flow of dollars into these trade partnerships, to standardize that into all of our trade partnerships, because it probably is limiting that we don't take private dollars. I mean, and it's limiting in the sense that I think it externalizes those relationships more to private decisions of legislators rather than, state government having oversight and knowing, okay, this, I mean, I knew a legislator who went on a trip to Azerbaijan that was paid for by the Azerbaijani government. And like, that is at their own political risk, but maybe it would help legislators make better decisions if we had some transparency built in. So I guess that's just a broader discussion to take back to the treasurer about how I think allowing for private capital actually makes it more transparent, and we're better off knowing more about where the money comes from rather than individual legislators making decisions.
Yeah, is there anything you'd add on the transparency piece that we could use in this bill?
Well, I'm not sure that I have suggestions to add to the language, but I have a couple of points. We, as the administrators of the commission, would require all members of the commission to take the state's standard ethics training.
That's right.
And that's something that I have to take every year. The treasurer has to take it every year. And the training speaks extensively to accepting favors, gifts, etc. from outside entities. I think also the way this is constructed is that there would be a fund set up and administered by the treasurer's office that allows private solicited donations in order to offset the administrative expenses of the commission. I would predict that any money being given to the state to support the commission would very transparently go into this fund.
Right.
And then all of the expenditures would also be recorded in a very transparent way, the way that we administer all of our funds. And so that's maybe one factor.
So sorry, just to build on that, all the funds would be publicly recorded. I mean, the public could see what funds,
they always are, right? It's all a matter of public record. We keep our vision accounting system keeps record of all of it. Sometimes it's in codes and invoice numbers and things like that, but you could see everything if you pull a report now.
Right. How do people do that now? They pull a report from the treasurer's website, or they call and do a FOIA, or?
Well, we don't receive very many requests,
Okay.
but if they did do a records request, we could get that information. It would have to be a back office report pulling from our data. From, treasury staff would have to do that work. It's not accessible on the website. That said, I don't think that it would be that challenging to do something like this for the commission. If we needed to do a one-off.
Right, like an annual, we
Right.
review publicly our.
Exactly.
expenditures that
Yeah.
we receive.
And there are several funds you'll notice in the treasurer's office annual report where, we show the amount on an annual basis.
And baby bonds is a pilot where you received private funds. that
Yes,
People could.
we
look
have
at.
received one $5,000 donation so far.
Yeah.
So,
There's a question regarding the ethics training. So the ethics training, is it based on a particular set of either rules or statute or otherwise that says what's in the training and what the ethical rules and requirements are that are being taught?
it's a really good question. There's a state ethics commission.
Right.
And the state's continuing education
Mhm.
program that creates the training. I've taken it a number of times, but I didn't do the curriculum development, so it might be a question better suited for them as to where they fall.
Yeah, I would like to
Yeah.
understand what's in it and
Sure.
I
from
think
our perspective, is it sufficiently complete?
Yeah, and it's a good question. The Senate GovOps, we oversee the Ethics
Yeah.
Commission. You can go online and look at their trainings. The Ethics Commission has they do a lot with very few people, and they do a lot of trainings. All of state government, they do ethics
Well,
trainings.
again, why this is particularly important, I'm on the ethics committee. I've never had to train.
Oh,
I was gonna say, yeah, I mean,
Maybe-
let's
maybe-
sign up for that.
maybe
Um,
your
let us
committee should
sign
sign
up.
up.
I
and see.
think
Yeah.
it'd be a great idea.
Yeah. And we do so many little trainings in the beginning of session for everyone. This is where we get the most questions about how do I ensure I understand the rules that apply to us and other legislative bodies. So
I mean, I can share, in the treasurer's office in particular, we take it very seriously. I was one time at an event with former treasurer peers. She received a bottle of maple syrup, like a half-gallon maple syrup, as an honorarium for speaking, and she refused it politely. But because the value was over $15, she couldn't take home the maple syrup. So there
I
are.
think that was over 25. So even on that, we should all be.
It may have been inflated since I was there with her, but I think that there are ways that we can mitigate those components.
Well, I'm fine with the Irish language, as it is, it lays the trail to see, how this works or doesn't work for possibly other trade commissions, so I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah.
I'm not
you
quite-
had a
I'm not quite comfortable if we really understand private versus public funding. And, I agree that transparency, it's probably like the least of the issue, but it's more about what we should be allowed to take. And I would feel more comfortable if the Office of Legislative Counsel, from an ethical perspective, gave us their feedback on commission setup in this regard. And I do agree that once we set a standard, that standard can be rolled into other bilateral relations, but not having an ethics view of council on this type of arrangement, I'm not comfortable at this point until I hear from which council does. So
Okay, well, we
Approach that.
get Rick next, and then we can also get the Ethics Commission and have Christine weigh in, review too. But from your point of view, these monies would be handled in a very transparent fashion. We can work on I think Dave work on the disclosure piece, and anything else we need to do to make you feel comfortable with that.
I mean, if there is, we can manage the fund for the criteria that is outlined in statute. So that's what I'll say. If there's additional criteria that you would like around what monies could be accepted and what monies can't be accepted, and that's codified in statute, it's very simple for us to manage the fund in that way. We simply refuse any funds that don't qualify.
Right. And have you other funds like that there are guardrails around?
We have other funds that allow for private donations, like baby bonds fund.
Right.
The guardrails in that case, there are not too many. I think in that case, the difference is that the policy use for those funds is spelled out really clearly. The policy use options for the Trade Commission funds, it's more broad to defray administrative expenses to the commission. Well, what are administrative expenses for the commission? What's the definition of that? Do administrative expenses for the commission, does it simply just mean like photocopy and, maybe booking a room or something like that for a meeting space, renting AV equipment for a public hearing or something? Does it mean travel? Right? So those are questions I think that maybe, if I don't have a particular recommendation, but if you wanted to focus on that ethics question, you might consider a more specific definition there.
Oh, that might be a good suggestion.
But I would leave that to legislative council.
Okay, well, legislative council is next, so.
Great. Do you want to shift to the capital?
Yes,
Okay. So
the task force.
the task force to address business
Access to
growth
that.
and
It's-
access to capital.
Right.
What section?
That is the next section, which is section, oh, it's not, it is the section 9.
So this language has the treasurer or designee as a member of this task force. The administration work is handled by ACCD, which is great for me personally. And I think that, Treasurer Pichek would be interested in serving on this task force. He's had a number of events throughout the year that support small businesses. Just yesterday, we had a webinar with almost 200 attendees called Doing Business in Uncertain Times.
Right.
In sort of collaboration with the Chambers of Commerce, BPSR, Common Good. And so I think this is sort of right.
It's in his bailiwick.
It's in his bailiwick, and it behooves the treasurer's office and the financial outlook of the state to support business growth.
On his 10% of Vermont has been, he's made, in baby bonds, he's been very engaged with work that,
Yes.
of this nature. So thank you. We're glad he will continue to be as enthusiastic and engaged.
Wonderful.
Any questions for Ashley? Great. Okay, Rick, why don't you come join us and we can chat about the disclosure. Thanks, Ashley. Always good to have you.
I have to go upstairs for another thing, so if you have any other questions,
We will be in touch.
you know how to reach me.
We do. Thank you so much. And thank Mike.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's been a week since I've been here. It's getting lonely now.
I don't think you're getting that lonely. Sounds like you're
Other committees have shown their love.
keeping your very good.
All right. Rick Sable, Office of Legislative Counsel. Shall I start with the Ireland Trade Commission, or do you want to
Why
start
don't we
with?
start with the Ireland Trade Commission,
Okay.
because Ellen did yeah, and then we can walk through all the changes here.
Okay, so section 6. I did email the committee, I think it was Monday, possibly Sunday, I can't remember which day it was, about other states that have similar trade commissions with Ireland. The approach, and I talked about that as well. And that was a response to these gifts, this whole discussion we've been having. So most states have this exact language that we have. I guess this is kind of the model language that has been used to create these other trade commissions. Not that we can differ, and we can, obviously set ours up the way we want. So if there's questions about that email, let me know, but I thought I'd made that point. So when it comes to this section, subsection G, the authorization to raise funds, this is pretty different. This is pretty unique as far as how we're not paying the commissioners, as you know. Instead, we are keeping the commission funded through these, solicitation or fundraising events, which could be donations, grants, bequests from individuals, corporations, etc., to defray I'm going to highlight this here.
So can I just for clarification, Rick? So you said in one case, the language is very similar to other states,
Yep.
but this particular paragraph is different from
No,
other states? Okay. 'Cause
I'm sorry.
you said you made a jump and I didn't
Yeah.
that jump with it.
Yeah, I'm starting off cold here. Yes, so they are similar.
Okay.
Massachusetts,
G.
yes, yes. Massachusetts would be the one state that really didn't address how they pay for their commission. I'm not sure, I didn't research Massachusetts more, but it could be that they just fund it in a totally different way, but it doesn't say this exact language.
And it doesn't say who will, it doesn't
Right.
state.
Right,
Yeah.
doesn't prohibit it, nor does it really lay out how they pay for that commission.
Well, I guess one of the things though is I read the language about how they pay for things. The issue of the legislators on the commission seems to be silent vis-a-vis per diem, but typically that's what we would find, and it in fact would limit the amount of money being given to legislators on the basis of that. And here I didn't see, it just seemed to be a limit.
No, well, subsection H, the last subsection, does say that members, not just legislators, but any member cannot receive compensation or be entitled for reimbursement of expenses by the state for the service on the commission. So that,
Yeah.
But that's just by the state. That's
Right, so, but
that's, I think, the other concern.
I
which
mean,
is-
that's the absence of the norm is what concerns me.
right, so you're used to seeing as normal, the per diem expenses for.
I think that is
Right.
state business that a legislator does in a consistent manner.
Yeah, so the option is, as talked about earlier, is adding in that standard language, where they would be getting a per diem.
But they would be limited by those values.
Right.
But they wouldn't necessarily be limited about expenses, I would think. Because that would be a thing to clarify. I think that travel, for example, the per diem, well, I guess the per diem
Yeah,
expenses,
It would stay the same whether you were in Ireland or
yeah,
here.
that would cover.
Right. And
Transportation expenses,
And
even here.
in full transparency, each senator is given $1,000 a year for participating in conferences or for flights, or so you could apply your $1,000 to.
$1,000 isn't going to get you to Ireland and back.
I agree, but then that is.
I'm actually going to Ireland this summer and I find flights out of Boston for like $600 round trip.
That's
Super,
one way.
super reasonable.
No, round trip.
Well, they don't let you back.
So I, again, entertain more discussion about that, adding that language in or somehow clarifying the per diem aspect. But right now, I think it's clear as to not getting per diem from the state, right? Now, how they're paid by the commission, it's limited to administrative expenses. And this is where we can, again, further clarify as the treasurer's office testified that we could be more prescriptive and say, this is what these expenses are. It includes hotel, it includes travel, or maybe it does not include these things. Mileage reimbursement, you can kind of, if you want, lay those out so there's not confusion as to.
I think some of us might be more comfortable with that.
Couldn't be a hard cap of no more than X $1,000 a year. Would that be a little more inclusive or make people comfortable?
Or just limiting it, the administrative expenses to meetings, to the meetings in America. I mean, I think the challenge is that you then get into, if you serve on this commission, you're guaranteed a trip to Ireland every year, or, you're guaranteed all expenses paid trip to someplace. It can be a bit seen, I think, as a bit of a boondoggle. And I think what you want to avoid is that, is that your concern? Yes. Okay. So I think that if we can come up with language that limits the administrative expenses to the meeting and gathering here in Vermont and be very specific, additional expenses incurred in participation on the commission would be borne by the commissioners themselves or something. I don't know what we want to say, but
Particularly like that as a solution.
what?
I say, I don't know that I particularly like that as a solution.
Okay, so, but what would we like, what would give, because in a way, you could also just get rid of the ability to raise additional money and just have people pay the per diems and the standard state board participation.
Well, if you're participating in a state board,
Yeah, you get $50 a meeting.
you get, and how many people volunteer for that, and then legislators get the per diem amount of legislatures, but travel isn't, if you're traveling on official business for a business purpose.
But I think that's the concern I'm hearing from David, is that, you know, that if you're a member of this commission, is official business going and spending a week in Ireland? I mean, then it would be viewed as this great commission to serve on, and I mean, it would be a great commission to serve on anyway. I think, because it would be
The
interesting.
members by
But
lottery.
how do we, council, how do we get over this hump?
You've done a lot of international travel. Do you have some thoughts on?
Yeah. So I would approach it the same way we approach it in business, is where we're capped by per diem.
So just go to the legislative paying per diem.
Yeah, just cap the, hotel, the meals, et cetera. Everything's capped. US government's got great per diem, very transparent rates. It's just when you mix private money with expenditures to legislators, there's got to be a cap. Otherwise, it could be viewed as a free for all. That they supply the investors whomever supply more money, then the value of the trip, the quality increases, but it's got to be capped. It's got to be just
Sorry.
no, just because we're representing the government, we really have to be.
I'd be interested in, international travel, in terms of what the federal government pays. I don't know that they necessarily pay the same rates they do for US lodging.
No.
Yeah.
All international, every location around the globe
As a rate.
Department of State.
But, yeah.
It's their per diem rates as opposed to, US per diem.
But I'm not sure we're anticipating international travel necessarily for this commission. I mean, that may be a side
It's a
benefit,
factor.
Yeah.
but
It's a factor that needs to be
address.
agreed to.
Yeah.
Clear, are you supporting the money can be privately raised, but capped at what you would get reimbursed for?
Yeah, so I struggle with ethically, I want to know that that's really acceptable from a legislative council ethics perspective. And then the second issue is, it's got to be capped. It's got to be, it's got to be reflect, no more than the Department of State per diem rates. That's the way everybody operates around the world. And we have to do the same. We should do the same.
All right.
But the money, in a government setting, that's one thing. In a corporate setting,
Most corporate would do the same thing.
my corporate experience has been not that. My corporate is what's reasonable, and that's a subjective judgment. But there are no hard caps and no hard requirement.
I'll accept that, but my experience was quite different. It was always capped.
Yeah, but you were typically going as a government contractor.
They're all commercial jobs.
Yes.
But we're all government employees too. So you were contracted, but I mean, we as legislators, that would fall squarely in sort of similar expectation that we could peg it to, so I would love to hear how it sounds like a number of people would feel more comfortable if we did, in fact, do this as a per diem with expenses, with the standard state expenses, and perhaps with a qualifier that if there is international travel, that it be capped at the State Department. What's your reference for that? The Department of State's expense
Per diem rates.
per diem rates.
It would be interesting also to just perhaps speak with NCSL as to how sort of other states do international travel.
Yes.
Or the chamber, American Chamber.
Yeah. Again, one of the ways to deal with it also is to use the table, like the Department of State table, but allow the speaker and the pro temp to make an exception in certain circumstances for travel that they deem to be reasonable, that may be different from standard rate. So you provide an out if necessary.
Well, why don't we start with the standard that's published and accepted? Maybe we get that list. Maybe we get the Department of State's list on that.
It's all on the web. It's-
Yeah.
Right.
It's
So we can,
updated.
Mhm.
and so am I hearing that we're wanting to actually shift from the private funding and go to straight legislative pay and per diem and expenses
Where
for
did
our
this funding model is that's in this come from?
this is the House bill. This is, and it came, I believe, in Tom, do you know where it came?
Yeah, I think the House passed it last session.
Yeah.
Representative Casey, and they sort of stall in the Senate because there are other matters that are pressing on us. It wasn't because there were major objections, but I just want to crystallize a clarity point
Yeah.
here. So I love the idea of using the standardized State Department per diems and so on. But are you also advocating that the monies to reimburse at those rates only comes from the state of Vermont coffers, or that they can be
No,
privately raised?
so I'm okay with private sources.
Okay.
If our legal counsel, from an ethics perspective, says, yep, that's okay, then go. If there's any hesitation, then I wouldn't go down that route. But that's why I'm kind of looking to.
So-
So that was gonna be one of my questions was, do you want this funds to still be, raised privately? So you just want those private funds to be regulated at these per diem rates that are set by the Department of State for international
That's
travel.
just my
I
recommendation.
But for
think
local
only for
travel,
international. I
the-
think state, anything we do
The
in
Vermont-
state, that's state business, we do our own per diem and our expenses.
Okay. You might want to make sure with the President's office.
But that's capped at.
But the money could be privately funded, but you're capped at our per diem rates.
Right. That's
I
my.
believe that's what I
Yeah.
heard in this conversation.
Well, does that say that if you don't raise any money, that legislators don't get paid and their expenses don't get paid?
No, I think they get their per diems, but if there are any additional expenses, that would be, I mean, if you're meeting in state, you might have to spend the night.
Well,
So-
I think there'd be two kinds of per diem that you're talking about. The per
Well, there
diem
are per
that
diem,
is reimbursement for travel expense, and there's per diem that is paid to members as a salary.
I view those, the per diem and expenses. I think that's how we're paid. We have, when we on these task forces, we have a per diem and we get then their expenses. And if you have to spend the night or you have to have a dinner, you get those expenses. And we have a standard set and you can choose whether you get reimbursed or you just can get the standard event. But I think foreign travel is another thing altogether. And I think that we could peg to the Department of State. I think that sounds like it makes sense. I think, Thomas, help us. What were you thinking about the additional money that could be?
I don't have a
raised?
dog in this fight, so it doesn't matter which way we go. I just want clarity for how we're to draft this. I feel like we're trying to set a maximum amount of reimbursements, and then the separate question is where those monies come from. And so if we're comfortable with the monies being raised privately to fund, as long as the people on this commission don't get anything more than are currently permitted reimbursement rates by the state of Vermont or by the State Department, or is that where we are? I'm looking for clarity here.
That's my sense of the conversation.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
And let me further clarify. So let's say the commission raises no money but yet they're meeting, they're traveling. Do they get paid?
I'd say no, but I'm cheap.
Let's say there's $0 in the account and yet they're accruing expenses for traveling, in the state of Vermont, let's just say. They don't get reimbursed, right? Because
I think the legislators would be, if we're going to this if you're doing this blended thing, it's a little bit of a challenge.
it is, that's my.
I know. So part of me would love to do it just with all legislative pay and not have private fundraising opportunity and just see how that works. Because I think the blended thing is a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, legally, I agree with you. I think the treasurer's office, you may want to talk to them and see, because they're going to do the accounting. If they're taking in private funds, and then are they also taking in the funds from the state for the state reimbursement? It gets, I think, pretty commingling of funds. It gets kind of complicated.
I think that's a challenge.
It is.
So, I want David to feel more comfortable. Is there a disclosure if we keep it as it is and send it to the House as it is? could we work on further disclosure language? Or would we rather just for this draft and for the Senate, just make it all legislative reimbursement and not, and take out the private fundraising opportunity?
I had one suggestion. That's in yellow, and we can work on this, but again, this is all the same, allowing only private funding for expenses. You could limit it, not include international travel.
Right.
And we can be more broad than that, but if that's the concern, if that's where you think there could be some whatever chicanery, then
No, I think it makes it more of a boondoggle and increases people's interest in serving on it only because they would maybe be guaranteed every other year a trip to Ireland, which I think it isn't necessarily what we're hoping for with this. Keisha has a thought.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to take a very big picture look at this right now because we are engaged in trade wars. And I think it's going to be even more important that state to state, person to person relationships happen, sidestepping our federal government at this point. And in that context, I think there's where ethics, equity, and common sense kind of meet is that you focus on disclosure, and I would say including in kind. If you have Re-Roz on Church Street wants to host the group for, some Irish celebration, then we should disclose that, so that everything's really above board, just like if some other Irish entity or US entity that we think, we have our own personal opinions about were to host something like that, and we'd see no money change hands, but we'd see a lot of expense incurred. So I err on the side of more disclosure, including in kind, and then equity and common sense would say it would be helpful if some of these expenses were covered in a transparent way so that anyone can participate. If you were saying, oh, you could be part of this, but you have to cover your own travel, that would preclude, I think, people who were interested. And I just see us needing to think about flexibility and how these state to state relationships are funded, flexibility and transparency. So I think people will be very careful about looking at the financial reports and who's giving to this and how they feel about them if it's more transparent. Right now, I don't know if people realize that a lot of legislators are invited on trips where we have to make our own decisions about how much we allow to have paid for versus pay for ourselves. And I think making it a state function would push some of those financial questions further underground rather than make them fully disclosed. And I'd like to see us look at all of our trade relationships through this new lens, because I think it's going to become more important, and we don't have any new money to put toward this effort. But I think it's really important for our state's economy.
Oh, I agree. So where are we with that? I mean, I don't disagree because I think there's an equity issue.
I kind of agree with Senator Brock that other states have figured this out. Other states, like you look at like a Massachusetts, Minnesota, they really feel strongly about their transparency and their ethical disclosures.
So other states, this is parallels. This bill at the moment parallels other states, right?
right, that's where we got the language from. This, other states have already done this in the last 4 or 5 years. It's kind of been more common. To address Senator Ron Hinsdale's concern, there is a report every year, but you could add and specify, say, including a disclosure of in-kind contributions and be as detailed as you want.
If we could build on
Require
this
that.
disclosure, I think that would be
Right, because it's a good point, because currently, the treasurer's office can make it public the contributions they get, but the in-kind contribution may not be
Yeah.
may not somehow make its way through that.
I'm like really sympathetic to tying ourselves to federal things that function, but I don't know how long I would feel comfortable with that. And I think the public in Vermont can decide, did they spend too much on a plane ticket? Did they, spend too much on this party in Barrie? I don't know. But I'd rather not tie ourselves to a federal government right now that is, we are in court over transparency and, constitutional functioning with.
That maybe is a good point at this moment. Would people feel comfortable building on the disclosure element and in the report? And I think there's another place. I'd like to, if we want to further identify what administrative expenses would be. I think those two places at the moment then would be the places we would want to be supporting. I mean, being clear on. I don't think we want to say international travel, given that further conversation, which you just had that additional language. I think if you have disclosure on what that is, we've already disclosed that the senator's got $1,000 a year for travel and or for conferences. So, and that would be
I don't think that's the same thing. That $1,000 is if you want to go to an NCSL meeting or so on and so forth. That's different. This is an official job that you have serving on a commission doing something specific. And I don't think that $1,000 has anything to do with that.
fine. How would we like to limit the administrative expenses?
I think it's captured by people being able to look and see they overspent.
Transparency is
Yeah,
the way,
exactly.
you don't have to capture it with a specific
Right.
number.
Oh, I wasn't thinking a
No,
specific
I mean,
number.
but it's the reasonableness of it. You can always also limit it by that any travel, I hate to use international, also has to be approved by either the pro tem or the speaker or something like that, so that it's second
Yeah.
level of review.
Yeah,
But reasonable, I think, we're dealing with adults here.
right, exactly. I could see a scenario in the near future where certain countries our federal government is telling us you can't travel there and get any reimbursements from the federal. I mean, I really think we should make this flexible for an uncertain future.
Thomas.
I don't have a lot of concerns, but my friend across the table is doing a lot more international travel than me, governments, and these types of things. So I'm really looking to you, Senator Weeks. Where do you think we ought to land based on your lived experience traveling all over the world for government contracts?
Yeah, so I think I've tried to share that. I'm not sure where the leap of doubt is with the federal government and such. This is about us. This is about our state. This is about our relations with Ireland in particular. I do think this should be the model that we emulate for other commissions, international relations and such. My only point is to make the decision on where the money comes from. That's one decision. And then where the money, whatever the money is, wherever the source is, that'll be determined whether it's a reasonableness test or it's capped by other other resources such as Department of State. And that's just to answer Senator Chittenden's point. That's the standard we always used in commercial work and government work, is just use Department of State. And everyone understood that the hotel or the meal per diem was capped. And if you wanted to spend more, that was on you. So
Right.
Under that,
Suite or don't fly first class. It's standard.
But the companies differ. The organizations differ. In all of my experience in the corporate world, it's a reasonableness standard.
And I can see your point. I mean, so when the last climate talk was, I think it was in Azerbaijan. And when they saw that it was, going to be this climate talk that included all these wealthy countries from around the world, the accommodation rates went up 20-fold.
Yeah.
So I absolutely hear your concern. I think to me that that would be taken care of in the question of how strong this relationship is and how well things are disclosed, rather than trying to find the right cap number.
So I think our Ledge Council has a suggestion, and I think then we need to land on this because we are running out of time, and I want everyone to be able to stand up and have a little bit of a break before we start at 11.
So reading this again, look at subsection H.
Yeah.
Members of the commission shall not receive compensation or be entitled to reimbursement of expenses by the state for the service. So this would include travel. So, I
That's
think,
existing in the bill.
yes, this is already in the bill. So I think the way this was intended to be is administrative expenses don't include travel for individuals. They may include hotel reservations and again, but not for specific people, right? It may include room rental, it may include like a restaurant, renting out a restaurant for a party, right? But specific members cannot be reimbursed. So, and you may not want that, okay? Maybe you want members to be reimbursed for travel. However, this bill, as I think my understanding at this point is that you, as Senator Weeks, if you were on this commission and you had $8,000 flight ticket to Ireland, you would not be reimbursed for that based on this.
But what is more likely to happen is why I mentioned in kind,
Right.
that the organization is likely to buy your plane tickets, so you're all in the same flight, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's almost, it's not the same in my mind as a government contract, because usually they're not booking your travel and setting the, itinerary for you. These trips are almost always, we booked everyone on this flight, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why I think the in-kind should be disclosed, but allowed. I think that's just common sense with how these tend to work.
That was my point, was, it appears that a member just would not be reimbursed for his or her specific expenses related to the commission, that it would need to be as a group that Senator Hinsdale said, or just specific to a certain administrative expense that the commission incurs for hosting an event or some other
Right.
administrative.
So your suggestion is that to leave it as it is, or to add some clarifying.
You
around
could,
expenses.
if you really want to limit those administrative expenses to not include air travel, international, you can do that just to ensure that you don't have this group that's, you buy 10 tickets. The commission buys the 10 tickets and it incurs that cost. Is that an administrative cost? It could be.
But the question in my mind is just disclosing them actually brings more transparency to the process, because it might not be the commission that buys the ticket anyway.
Right.
It might, I don't know if there's an Air Ireland, probably. I'd love to go to Ireland.
There's Aer Lingus.
Thank
There's Aer
you.
Lingus.
So, they might I don't know. I think it's better to have more disclosure and more flexibility.
Can we feel comfortable with that parameter moving this forward? And I'm sure the House is going to on it, and we'll come back to this as the session goes on.
Plus more disclosure. Where would you suggest the additional disclosure?
I think in the report, if you're okay with it being once
Can
a
we
year.
build on the report in section F?
Yes, that's my thinking.
Yes.
As long as you're okay with it being once a year.
Wouldn't it be in the disclosure language? It is authorized to raise funds. And okay, so then it says, and accept donations, grants, and bequests. Does that include in kind? Does that legal language mean in kind?
I think
Yeah, I think you would assume that,
you could clarify it if you wanted. But I think that it doesn't say disclosing. I think that we, just by nature of them being on the treasury
well,
website, they're disclosed.
yeah, because an in-kind donation can't be deposited, right, by the treasurer, necessarily.
But it's saying the commission's authorized to raise funds, so I'm trying to find the link between funds, donations, grants or requests are deposited, so somewhere we'd have to have a separate disclosure for in-kind.
Right,
Yeah, I think you just add that.
right.
I think we could add a disclosure on in-kind, and I think in the report, we would have a disclosure on individual. Yeah, I think we have a full disclosure on.
Maybe we'd say findings, results, financial analysis.
I think, let me work on it a little bit. I think I know what the committee wants as far as that's concerned. Ensuring full disclosure of the in-kind, the non-financial, because the financial stuff will be available to the
It'll be
treasurer's office.
transparent as.
But
it
the
is
in-kind,
reported on
the in-kind would not
on
be.
the
Yeah.
treasury.
So that would be added to the report, and I can add that language.
But I think we want the disclosure of what is spent on individual members.
Okay.
Is that my
Travel
understanding?
expenses, you know, but.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
for compensation though, remember, I think it ought to be just the same as with every other board or commission in Vermont. That if you're a state employee, you get like what you get as a state employee in the normal course of business. If you're a legislator, you get the legislative per diem. If you are a third party, you get $50 if people who serve on other boards and commissions get.
So you're wanting both, you're wanting both, the ability to raise money and have the legislators pay per diem.
No, but
That's what I get Randy.
That is exactly what I'm saying.
Great.
You're performing an official business of the state by serving on this commission as you do on every other board or commission, and you treat it exactly the same as you do every other board or commission. If you have any separate money that you raise for that for purposes of travel and transportation, lodging, hotel, whatever, those things may be dealt with through these private sources. So compensation to individuals is different. These are travel
okay.
expenses or commission expenses that you're raising this private money to do, other than compensation of the individual. member.
Above and beyond the cost of doing business as a commission in Vermont.
Correct.
Okay, but okay, let's say I'm not like honestly, I'm okay in whatever direction you go. I don't want it to seem like I have too strong an argument, but if
Compromise and do half of it one way and half of it the other.
Well, this is a plan here.
if the entity, the commission or the private partners that they have, if they buy the hotel block, does that need to fit our state
No,
per diem rate? Okay, it's if you receive any money.
the only compensation that you're gonna receive from this commission,
Okay,
if you're a member of the commission, is
Yeah.
the same that we do with every other.
so
board
it's
commission.
capped. If you receive direct compensation of any kind, you have
Right,
to
that
pay
direct
that.
compensation
Yeah.
is if you're a state employee,
Right,
whatever your state salary is for that period of time, supply to it.
that's
If you
fair.
are someone from the outside, you get $50 a day.
So,
Right.
Whatever number we put for that
Right.
right now.
Right.
And then if you're a legislator, you get your legislator per
so
diem.
in
Period.
country, I hear you
Doesn't
proposing.
matter whether it's in country, out of country, or on the.
Oh,
I think that's fine. I think
It's
that
exactly the
direct
same.
money to you is capped.
It is only the money that you spend for things such as travel and other kinds of
Mhm.
expenses that are paid for by these private funds.
Mm-hmm. And are in-kinded.
Correct. That's a
Yeah.
clear separation.
And that
between
has to
the-
then, we will have further disclosure that all the, that individuals
Right.
on the commission will disclose annually. What,
Right. It's
in
not,
co-
oh, this group got this travel block, what you got a first class ticket and got reimbursed for it or something. It's, if you are getting any money directed to you, it's capped. I can respect that.
do you have a way of doing that, Rick?
Let me make sure I understand.
Yeah.
So it's subsection,
But more.
subsection G
Yeah.
allows for private donations, solicitation of funds, just for admin expenses, correct? You're okay with that? Not for individuals getting, okay. But then currently subsection H would prevent Senator Brock, with your suggestion of getting per diem, right? So subsection H would go away and that would be replaced with the standard per diem
The
language.
legislators and
Mhm.
Yes. Am I-
other members of the commission.
Right.
Yes, and then you want an additional disclosure. This is where I may be confused.
Yes.
For members of the commission, for their per diems, you want that to be disclosed?
No, I think what I've heard people say is that anything they receive additionally to what is provided for statutorily in terms of compensation, that anything additionally, like a trip to Ireland, would be disclosed. There would be annual disclosure
There'd
in
be
H in the
in-kind
report.
Yeah.
There would be annual disclosure on individual, on additional expenses or additional
Mhm.
whatever.
Right.
international travel maybe, or.
Well, I think what Randy's saying in H, maybe you just said this, and I'm just, my brain's not working, but is that any direct reimbursements you receive would be capped at the state per diem rate.
Right.
And then what I'm saying in G is that in-kind donations would be transparent so that, because I mean, again, if you're traveling on official federal business, you might be paying for your own meal. You might be doing that, but all these trips, they take you to someone's house or around, and they're going to have to show the in-kind amounts for all of those, which is to me more important because that directly links who then is furnishing goods.
Yeah, but basically, there are two kinds of money
Yeah.
that are involved here. One is the diem for work. That
Right.
people are being compensated for. They're being treated compensated in exactly the same manner they are for serving on any other board
Right.
commission that the state has.
Right.
That's
Yes.
one. The second, though, are reimbursement of expenses and so on. Well, there could be reimbursement on expenses that are paid for by
Mhm.
these private funds.
So then that would be the disclosure of any additional in-kind
Correct.
contribution a member of the commission receives. I
Okay,
think
can I
that's
ask
what I
one
hear.
more complicated question
No.
of Senator Brock?
Well, but
Can
And then
I,
any other reimbursements, again, do those through the treasurer's office. The
right,
same way that we have set here, and the treasurer can maintain the books for that.
right. Here's my question. Do you want those per diems to be a shall or a may? Like, let's say someone says, oh, I have to get childcare for today. I'd like my $55 to defray the cost of the childcare,
Mhm.
versus someone else who says, I don't want to take any money.
We spent how many $1 million earlier today, and we did it much faster.
I know, right?
Well, that's because it's
But I
already
do not
done.
really think we should start to build a model that's consistent because these haven't been transparent trips.
No,
And
they
they're
are
more important now.
exactly. So I think, do you hear, I'm beginning to gel. David, are you on board with this, with the additional
Let's see
disclosure?
what it lands on. In language.
Okay. Okay,
Here it
so
comes.
we have a new H that we're gonna do.
Yes. Yep.
A new H with legislative compensation and members of the commission compensation. And we have we have an expanded, E, or whatever the hell it is, F. We have an expanded F, which builds on the disclosures of in-kind, of anything a member of the commission receives in in-kind fashion.
Can I just make sure I understand? So the last section in question is that they're entitled to it. It doesn't mean they have to take it.
The per diem.
Yeah.
You never have to.
Yeah, I mean, you can choose not to put in a request.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have to actively opt in.
Right.
To receive.
Right.
Just
In
like,
general, right? For the
Yeah.
per diem, you have to.
Well, I mean, I think in general, like we get the money automatically for, if we're talking about per diem versus expenses, you have to put in for your expenses, but you get the per diem automatically.
Correct.
By your
Yes.
definition.
right.
Yes.
So
Yes, I think that would
you
continue.
would have to essentially reject the per diem, which I think you can do voluntarily. I just want to make sure that that's clear.
I can double check if that's what the committee wants. You want it to be a may instead of a shall for the per diem?
If it's entitled to, I think that covers it.
Okay, it's gonna be calling.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
I think this is good. I think we
Great.
landed on the spot and we'll see the language, there's more disclosure and target. Okay,
Yeah.
let's keep. Can we keep
Oh,
going?
I thought we were done. Sorry.
No, I think we want further discussion.
I do have to go to House conference
You
at
were-
that point.
Oh, okay, you need
That's why
to.
I heard, but no, I can hang out for.
Okay.
Can I just escape this?
I think we have lots of.
I clearly.
So moving on from section 6,
Yeah.
we're at section, we're at section 9, which is the task force, the access to capital. We've added, the executive director of Launch VP, at the request of the chambers, I believe. And Rick, you want to finish that?
Yeah, I rejoined the Zoom because I left in a rush.
Sorry.
No, that's, I heard break and I was like, oh,
No, I was wrong. Keisha, I was an hour ahead of ourselves.
Heidi, could you invite me back to the Zoom
Yeah.
or approve my? And just, so the section 7 and 8, just to finish the Ireland Trade Commission, those also come from the F-78, the original bill, putting in a deadline for the appointments and then to repeal, to give the Assembly a chance to review the Trade Commission, which is 5 years from now, June 30th, 2030. So you
Yeah.
need to act to say that
Right.
as kind of the standard now that we are asked to do is have the Assembly review new programs to ensure that it's
Great.
appropriate. Okay, then we are on section 9, and you saw this language last time, but we have some new language that I have highlighted in yellow, and it's back on the screen now.
Right.
So this is the Accessing Capital Task Force. You may remember that this is a task force that would ideally help mostly small businesses grow and get capital. And I added one member to the task force, the executive director of Launch VT or designee. So now you have 8 people. I think the question for the committee was, do you want somebody with venture capital or
Yeah.
someone with that kind of experience to be on the task force?
And that was the landing with Launch VT. Is that correct, Austin?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Correct.
awesome. Okay. Yeah, I received that language from
Correct.
that recommendation.
Yeah, we asked for that recommendation.
And then for the powers and duties, we added a subdivision 3, which is determining what the state's role should be in accessing capital. And the current language says the task force should include the investment environment in the New England region, the availability of tax credits to leverage private capital, and ensuring support of the current tech hub designation. So those are things the task force would also look into. For subdivision 5, I added the word related. I just thought that'd be, if you do have related in there, I guess they could take up anything that they would like. So I decided maybe we should keep it to related issues.
I think I am having trouble on line 1 with the word determine. I think
Okay.
address, I mean, what key is, it's unclear what the state's role in accessing capital, but we certainly can enable many things. Particularly if you're looking at, so anyway, I would, if the committee, with the committee's support, I would change that word determine to address what the state's role is in accessing capital, including some of these, because.
How would they address it?
Well, they're meeting and addressing it, but that's just by being present, they are meeting to address it.
Assess and make recommendations concerning the state's role.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the question. I think for me, that's the big
The
question.
question for me is, what is the outcome that we want from
Right.
this group? And I just don't like study committees.
I know you, but I
You're growing
heard,
on me.
but there are a
You've
lot,
been here too long
there are,
and not long enough.
we have lots of people asking us to address the access to capital for our small businesses at different points.
But they're
in their
asking for capital.
well, but they're asking for what, so what is the state's role in that? And I think there are some things the state brings to the table on this, and I think that's the question for this group. And if you don't feel this is necessary, I am open to that, but I think, and I'd be happy to hear from Austin too, but I have heard that there is real interest in clarifying what the state's role is.
Who's in charge of this task force?
ACCD.
ACCD.
I think this is ACCD's job. I mean, like, I think we could
Right.
ask them to come back next year and give us a presentation on the state's role in access to capital and things they would need to do a better job. And they could talk to all these people as they often do. If this costs any money, I don't think it's a good use of money right now. That's me in the straw poll. If it gets included, I'll live.
So how can we reconfigure it to be a request of the?
No, I'm just asking, I think what Keisha is suggesting is that instead we ask ACCD to come back to us with a report, or whatever. I think give them
Recommendations,
more-
but finding
Yeah,
the-
recommendations on, how the state can,
We just did that with the treasurer's office in a couple instances where it, in my mind, works better because someone is accountable for, this is what we do, this is what we don't do, this is what we'd like to do. Give us $100,000.
I would just feel more comfortable asking ACCD before we do that. But yes, I am happy to consider that.
I think we can ask them, I think they'd rather do that than manage a task force of people that they already talk to regularly.
That's fine with me. There's one less third party who's gonna come and give us a report. The two committees on it before November
Right.
1, 2025, and it's gonna go into that report warehouse for the 39 education funding.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a lot of interest in this. And I think asking ACCD to, because I've had this conversation with Joan. There is lots of capital out there organizing it. Focusing. I think that's a
Right,
good
and
idea.
make this basically a task of ACCD, after talking with ACCD to make sure they can do it. And then in here suggest that as part of their work, that ACCD talks to a whole bunch of people we have listed.
Right.
They talk to them all the time. I mean, they're pretty clear on this. I think what we.
And in fact, for a new commissioner to have to run a task force instead of just explore
Do
the
the
question,
job,
it's
and this is
gonna be
part
better
of the
for
job.
them. Exactly, yeah.
I agree.
So let's refigure it as a request of ACCD to come back to us with, I think,
Similar.
similar,
Yeah.
absolutely similar.
Okay.
But Joan, sorry, and Lindsay, there we are. I think I will chat with Joan as soon as we're done, and hopefully we have. Hazel was here, but she's now. Okay.
Okay,
So that's what happens when you leave the room.
Yeah. You can't give them things. Okay, so
Section 10.
section 10.
Task force for the convention center and performance venue. I removed the word major for convention center. Or is it performance venue? I think it's performance venue.
Either way, it's
Major has been removed.
right.
It was before conference. As actually is also conference center. Now it's convention center.
Right.
The other changes are adding a fourth task member, a representative of Hello Burlington, who shall be appointed by the CEO of the Lake Champlain Chamber. So you have 4 members on the task force now.
So it kind of leads to a frequency conclusion as well. And I understand, I just wanted, my recommendation is to be some balance, so there's another perspective on another location. You know, Burlington is probably the most likely location, but you know, who else is heading down this path? Maybe on a smaller scale.
We could have a third member, a fifth member from the RDCs.
That's it. That's exactly what I was saying. Okay, it's just you got to find some balance here. Otherwise, it's just a.
Why don't we have a fifth member from the RDCs? And I know that there's been lots of work on this convention, but I think we need to pull those conversations together somehow. And I'm happy to have Austin speak to this for the chambers, but there's a lot of interest in trying to move forward, that no one has been able to move forward on this for a long time. And I think this will help focus the attention, and
I
it's
get
a big
that,
economic
But
development.
Burlington is not the only.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I
geographical
missed,
location that's been.
if I missed this, but when did this get added? This is highlighted language.
It's
just
new,
like a short
highlighted.
versus it's just like filled in.
About 2 weeks ago, this was feedback from the committee, the yellow highlight.
To
Yeah.
include Hello Burlington.
Yeah, and because they'd already done a lot of work on this, but I think it would be great if we added a fifth member from the RDCs. I think that adds some balance.
I just personally think saying Hello Burlington in this is way too specific, honestly.
So you could also have.
You could have an
someone appointed by the Lake Champlain
You could
Chamber.
have someone
Right.
appointed by the, yeah, I mean, we
Why-
don't usually in statute go that deep and like someone who from Burlington will be
Well,
appointed. This would be in South Burlington very easily.
Okay, and
I mean, others, you say the Lake Champlain Chamber.
Yeah.
They appoint the person as opposed to the state chamber. There's
And
gonna
that's
be that
right.
argument.
Yeah.
of Prejudice. quite
Yeah.
frankly. And a
I would agree.
conclusion.
I would agree.
Austin, I think you would love to weigh in on
Yeah,
this.
for the record, Austin Davis, Lake Champlain Chamber. The recommendation that the Lake Champlain Chamber be involved is a large part because Lake Champlain Chamber's already got an RFP live for a feasibility study for a convention center in the state of Vermont. The Lake Champlain Chamber has a long track record of working across the entire state. We were actually the state designated convention bureau for some time, and we had an appropriation at that time. The Hello Burlington moniker is that for the regional marketing organization that represents the northwestern part of the state, not just the city of Burlington. And that's mostly because most folks who are traveling to the greater Burlington area, they might be in Essex Junction at Essex Experience and will think that they're in a lovely neighborhood of Burlington because the arbitrary lines that we have are really nothing to folks who are in the visitor economy. So again, I think that the Lake Champlain Chamber has valuable perspective around the issues that need to be addressed to make a successful convention center. The language that I've, if you go further down the page, the language I provided Rick with around what the charge of the task force might be is supposed to be agnostic to a location. And really focus on what is necessary in order to deliver one. That includes, as you referenced before in this committee, Senator Ron Hinsdale, the infrastructure that would need to be created, both, social and physical, and then also, tax increment financing based infrastructure. Those things would be helpful to have. And then also looking at best practices and potential for operation and management as a public-private partnership.
Great.
Well, still, I think that making the Lake Champlain Chamber as the only other entity that's brought in reflects, I think is going to be assumed to reflect a degree of prejudice and predetermination of result. And I would much rather see, I certainly at the Lake Champlain Chamber, I'd certainly like to see involved in it, but I'd also like to see a statewide chamber involved.
I would have a suggestion, given there are only 4 people on this at the moment. I would add the RDCs, a representative from the, appointed by the RDCs, and I would add a representative appointed by the state chamber and have just 6. I think that would be fine. And
I think we should take the words "Hello Burlington" out of this.
Right, we are.
I mean, no offense, Burlington. If that went to the floor and someone asked about that, I know you gave a very cogent response, but I think it's
And I'd want
Right,
to as well.
That was fun.
I would suggest.
Hello, Ryan.
Yeah. So I think that we've heard that. I think let's do,
Quick question.
Yeah.
I understand who's doing the appointing. Do you want to regulate the type of person that they can appoint? The RDCs can appoint anybody, or does it need to be a member of the RDC? And does it need to be a member of the chamber, or just
Leave it up to them.
okay? So it could be any individual.
I
Okay,
think people who want to serve on this will raise their hands.
sure.
yeah. I mean,
making
what I go back to my concern about task forces like this because it's who's not there, and I think airports and transportation is one of the main functions
Right.
of this. How you figure out what the traffic impact will be, et cetera.
Absolutely. So let's instead, let's also
The airport's
add,
on the Hello Burlington.
so Rick,
I'm sure they are, and I'm sure they are.
So
Yeah.
this is easy. I think this is an easy one to solve because we can add that it's assumed the task force will language is, but will welcome all stakeholders that would be engaged in this because we do that fairly standardly. That we would be asking the participation of all the stakeholders involved, and that would include transportation. That would include lodging. Lodging establishment wants to have a member. It would be everybody. Lodging, transportation, water, sewer, commerce. Everybody.
So you want that in the membership section?
I think-
which shall be
and maybe another thing that says
We have
the
this.
task force will.
Yeah,
consult
we
with all
have.
stakeholders.
So, Madam Chair, I think you're
Yeah.
pleasantly
Yes,
surprised.
I know it's further down. I know.
So powers and duties, you see
Yeah.
the four, we had nothing before because this was a
Right.
fairly new piece of legislation now we have some language filled in. So their powers and duties are: one, determine the ability of the state to support the projects through appropriations, bonding, tax instruments, and other financial assistance. Identify infrastructure improvements
This is how we included, right?
needed for the projects, including water, sewer, transportation, lodging, and food. Consider management and operational options for ownership, maintenance, staffing, related items for projects, and research the attributes of convention centers and
Right.
performance venues that have been recently and successfully developed in states.
And I think under citizens, the task force will have the administrator of ACCD and could we add a piece about additional stakeholders? I know we have all those things here, but if we want, we can add that.
Shall have of other stakeholders. Without naming the stakeholders, I'm just making sure. Because you may want to be more specific as to who, because if you just say stakeholders.
Then I'm happy leaving it as it is because we added all the elements that need to be considered.
Okay. And maybe we can word that differently if you want to make sure these are.
David,
Isn't the whole goal here though to determine whether this is economically viable? So shouldn't there be a power of duty of summarizing the economic impact? I mean, that's the whole point here.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
absolutely.
it's a no-go.
Thank you. That would be
Summarizing economic
Okay.
impact.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think
Trying to remember what ended up sinking the UVM.
Tarrant Center, the pandemic.
No, I know I was on that task force 15 years ago, but they did a newer study of whether they would take over ownership of Memorial. When I worked for the mayor, they did a more recent market study on. Doesn't matter. I was on campus task force.
But good lesson learned. Right? So why didn't that task force? Why wasn't that task force successful?
Yeah.
State wasn't involved. That's where we're gonna fix it.
right.
Well, UVM basically, I think, said we don't see, like, we want our Tarrant Center and maybe something in South Burlington when the pedestrian footbridge is built.
Okay.
But we're not taking over Memorial Auditorium. That was like, I think, the last study.
The Champlain College was talking about taking over Memorial, but then that fell through.
And Memorial just had an RFP process that failed. So,
Yes, sadly, so it continues to be this white elephant, but
yes. Is it a white elephant or something else? I don't know what you call it.
a brick elephant.
Yeah, build one for us, then you're in Rutland. I'll be there right.
I know. I feel like that's kind of like the Saratoga one. Like,
How many did it seat?
I think I want to say 7,000.
Oh, wow.
It was big. I saw Megadeth there, Alec.
What was the location?
It's right downtown, right on Main Street.
Oh, I was like,
No,
did you
that's not
see
big.
Megadeth?
Yeah.
Yeah,
If I may, I think one of
yes,
the-
I'll see.
I think one of the things, I think Memorial Auditorium is a great example. We've been doing work regionally on this kind of thing. The Memorial Auditorium often ends up being a Burlington taxpayer problem when it's a regional asset. You talk to
Yeah.
anyone who lived within an hour and a half, 2 hours of Burlington, they'll tell you their first conference, their first concert was a Memorial Auditorium.
Yeah.
But then why is it that every single time we talk about how to refurbish that venue, which also has Burlington, fiber right underneath it, which
Yes,
is
yeah.
always an issue
Right.
when you talk and makes everything more expensive.
Yeah.
But, it's a failure of our regional government, frankly,
really
not
good
having
point.
regional government,
Yeah.
that a regional asset has to fall completely on the
Mhm.
backs of local taxpayers.
Right.
And if they build it, everyone from the region will come, but no one's going to help fund it from the get-go.
Right.
And that's what I think this task force could be really helpful in understanding
Yeah.
is just how do we,
Mhm.
put this cost basis across a broader
Yeah.
spectrum other than just residents of one community, be it
Right.
Rutland, be it Burlington, be it Newport, which is another great potential
I think
location.
that's a really good point because Burlington's also gotten in its own way, redeveloping memorials, the fire station, the parking lot, the Midtown Hotel.
Well, they can do it because they've got 45,000 residents, but at the end of the day,
Sorry.
that's not enough to spread the cost out
Right.
of such a big investment.
Right. But that's why they've done the RFP separately and it's never meant a regional solution could be.
But the best regional solution I can point to is you look at, at Hardack in St. Albans, that's a pool infrastructure in Ski Hill that they've, worked out a great MOU between all the neighboring communities.
Mhm.
And that's a huge accomplishment
Right.
for us. And we all like give Dominic Cloud kudos for that. And we're like, oh, that's so great. That's a Tuesday anywhere else in America. We
Right.
shouldn't be that hard to get all these.
But it's
local
also
folks
like the
together.
airport. I mean,
Yeah.
it has its pros and cons, but it has forced us to have a regional
Yeah.
conversation more often than not. That
And,
we all
and that's where Hello Burlington moniker is pulling in all of these like larger communities. And,
interesting.
we're trying to get.
Well, I'm sorry, Hello Burlington. I just
Yeah.
know on the floor of the Senate, that one could be
Understood.
very challenging
So,
to explain quickly.
yeah. So, the one concern I have is the timing of this report and that even though I know there's a huge amount of work that's been done on this and that what our objective is to sort of pull it together and actually try and shine some light on it and, see if it actually is worth it. October 1st seems to be an early date on it. Is there
December 1st.
well, remember, we have a drafting deadline of December, that first week. So I would say maybe November 1st, but maybe October 1st is a little aggressive.
I agree December. I thought we were trying to standardize when we asked for these things back, honestly.
And they are mostly now November because our drafting deadline is the first few days of December. I think it's the first Friday.
The annual reports those are trying to be standardized. The one-time reports are a bit more dependent on.
And Letch Council has asked us to do them more November 1st or November
Right.
15th.
If there's legislation.
So that we then have an opportunity to draft stuff from it.
I mean, here I am arguing against myself, but I would give this group something like 2 years. I mean, I've been part of groups that do really good work in 6 months on this question, but I wouldn't rush this for our
So-
legislative schedule.
So like,
This is much bigger than us.
I know, I agree. How about an interim report? Do November 1st or December 1st? I'd keep it November 1st because if there's any immediate action we need to do, let's do an interim report on November 1st. And then we'd have something hopefully to act on for next year.
Why?
Well, I don't know. You never know what they might come up with, and it could be a very modest. interim
No, I mean,
report.
like, would you end it next year?
No, and then we would end it the following year, and have a final report on November 1st to 26th. Does that sound good?
And those were the final changes were the dates. So I will adjust those.
Yep, exactly.
And-
Well, November 1st, I would just change it to 26,
Yeah.
or as soon as the report's done.
Yeah.
Okay,
Anything else, committee?
no, Patrick Tiverton is here. For us, we have, a break. We could take that break now if people want it, or we could have Patrick. I have given Patrick my work on the,
Are we getting a new draft to vote on today or?
well, I don't think
Not
that's
morning.
possible at the moment.
I
Okay.
got-
We're gonna
House
probably vote
members.
on it tomorrow, and because now we need to chat about when we can meet. Because, because Patrick, I've just given Patrick that, so he's digesting it for the moment. But I would really like us, if we could possibly vote on this tomorrow, we can either extend our time and go to 12:30 tomorrow, or we could get lunch as we're gonna do today and meet from 12:15 to 12:55. Your pleasure. Because I'd love to be able to get a new draft of this with the Irish work, the Irish Trade Commission work, and this new language on the tasks on the charge to ACCD on access to capital, and the new language on this. So I would love to be able to vote that out tomorrow if we could, and we're going to have a lot of labor input tomorrow, and we're going to need some discussion on our labor bills and where we're going with that goes. So what's your pleasure? We can either extend and go till 12:30 or 12:45 or 12:30, or we could take a break at 12 tomorrow and come back 12:15 and go till 12:55.
I can only go till 12:30 tomorrow.
Okay.
12:30.
So then if that's one, I'm happy to do that. That work for you?
What's today? AM?
Today it's Wednesday.
I know, right?
No, I mean, in terms of,
March
yeah,
12th.
the schedule that you want to do for today.
Today, we're meeting at 12:50. We're gonna take a break at 12, so you can get lunch, come back, and we're gonna go through the CHIP proposals and the work that we had sent John, Jessica, and David White out to do. There's been additional work done, and we're gonna look at that 12:15 to 12:55. Which hopefully is moving that project-based TIF discussion along. And then tomorrow, I would love to, if we could, at 12 o'clock, 12:30, review the new draft of this and go from there.
12 o'clock.
12 o'clock,
Yeah.
if that's okay.
We have a press conference.
Are you available?
Yes.
Thanks. And we'll hopefully get your vote at some point after the press conference.
On this bill tomorrow.
That's my hope is to get this
Yeah.
bill out
Okay,
tomorrow.
then I'll look.
And then
at
our
the
labor
draft.
bill, I'm hoping will be in a place, and on Friday, I'm hoping we'll also be able to meet during lunch so we can get our labor bill, whatever that looks like. It may be a condensed bill with the pieces that we can agree to at this point. I think there's a lot of the labor work we can continue to work on. And,
Okay.
but I'm hoping by the end of lunch on Friday, oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
It's gonna be a long one, but
Yeah.
so.
I'm also leaving the floor to host the healthcare providers in room 11.
On Friday.
Yeah.
So could we think about Friday, the floor, my guess is, let's,
You want to start at 8 a.m. on Friday?
I'm happy to start at 8. Could we start at 8 on Friday? I know that's tough.
Yeah, dude. Okay.
I'd rather, I know,
I know,
I'd rather start early than leave late.
Put in for overtime this week, though, man.
No, I want to, yeah, we need to get this. Listen, we're working it as hard as we can. So, is that so 12, we'll go to 12:30 tomorrow, and on Friday, I think let's start at 8 and then see where we are from there.
And we have to end at 11:30.
Yeah, like ask the pro tem if we can, what we could do about that.
He'd say start at 8.
Yeah, sure. Starting at 8 is fine. We just need extra time. Okay, great. Then,
Can I be clear on, so you want to vote that housing bill and the labor bill on Friday?
that is the hope. That
Okay.
we need as much time on both of
Yeah.
those measures as possible.
And tomorrow would be the economic development bill.
That is the hope.
Okay.
So, and Patrick is working on, the numbers I gave him in the fiscal note. So he's working on that, and we'll hopefully have that later today.
Now, the economic development bill we're talking about tomorrow, correct?
Yes.
Now, is there any workforce development in there?
Workforce, we're getting a big workforce bill from that, so we're gonna add all our workforce stuff
Right,
for
we're gonna
that.
add the military people to that.
We can certainly discuss it, yeah, absolutely.
That's post also.
Yeah, but that's okay, because then we have more time to work
Well,
on.
it's post crossover on one hand, but we're just simply putting in the version of a House bill that we have as an amendment, and so that's workable.
Yes, well, I think,
That's both the military retirement bill, because what I've heard, and I got yesterday, late in the day, that the military bill that they have for retirement in the House, they're basically pulling it and tearing it apart and not going to be introducing it. So the piece, that piece, and the other piece, the House had also said in one of the tax bills that they were doing, they were putting it in there, and that bill is being torn apart, and all the pieces are going in that and they go. So that's why it's critically important, since it hasn't moved in finance here, that we get that in one of our.
has it been taken off the wall at all in finance?
No, it hasn't. It hasn't.
But we should speak into it again with our chair, but I definitely support it's a workforce issue, bringing it into
Yeah,
our workforce.
it's a work- it's a work-
Makes sense to me.
Yeah,
And
and I never rely on the other chamber for.
21 senators. no
For
question about
material.
that.
21 senators
Yeah,
said
the
that, and
discussion.
the majority of the House sponsored that
Yeah.
bill as well.
Yeah.
It's the right thing to do to repeal that.
And, great, so, I mean, I'm absolutely, that's, an important, and it's been being sold in large measure as a workforce development bill, so I think it's
It is.
an appropriate place for it.
Well, when we are so out of sync with 47 other states on this,
Mhm.
it easily becomes an economic question. I mean, that's the
It's
thing.
both, and happily, that's, both are here.
No, one thing I probably have to do is get the JFO piece updated. I haven't.
We need the cost updated.
Yeah, I have the cost, they did it at the house, but again, I'll double check that. So we have it on Friday.
Do you want General Knight to write? like a
After
letter?
crossover, we're happy to have
Before you get to
everyone
that
we need
point,
to have.
Assuming that we're
Yeah.
dealing with it in that way and dealing with it with a
Yeah.
House bill. and
That's
we're
when we
amending
have
it,
time to deal with
That's
it.
fine,
I mean,
that's
what
fine.
we're trying to. Time.
But we're sure we're getting a House bill
Yeah.
on military.
No,
No,
we have
it's
workforce
development.
development.
Oh, okay.
And so that,
Oh, don't we have a workforce development bill?
no. We do not.
This
How
one's
it's
called an
done-
act relating to economic and workforce development.
Well,
That's the one that we just did.
we're,
Yeah,
Yeah, that's right. It does address workforce development, but there's a larger workforce development
We have-
bill coming from the House.
I mean, but maybe we just,
Well,
Think
we
about
could
it
put
this
it
way.
on this. So the question is time.
I don't think it's fair to put it on this at this point, quite honestly. I think it's a great thing to have a good discussion about, but I'm not willing, I would have a harder time putting it on this point. And I
but
would
we're
ask.
sure
that
we're
you-
Well,
getting a
let's say-
workforce
yeah, I mean,
development.
that's the thing.
I don't know when. Like,
Okay, all you need to do is look at the House Commerce site and see, look at the floor, and their workforce bill is coming out. They've been working, it's a big bill, and they've been working hard on it.
Okay,
We'll
so it's going to
clarify-
the floor.
Yes, we'll clarify that with Marcotte.
Okay.
He and I have active conversations, so. I
Is it
will-
on the floor at this point or is it just scheduled to be on the floor?
Well, they have this week just like we do to get everything passed.
Yeah.
So, I will ask Edie and Mike, where they are on that, but, I know it's
That's the
scheduled to
thing,
come out
is,
this week.
is if there is any likelihood that that is not going to get
Yeah.
out of there, that's what I really want to know, because if it doesn't, I'm going to propose that we add it to one of this workforce development bill that we have here.
Yes,
My support.
And I appreciate the discussion being had in committee, so you don't have to go to the floor
Mhm.
with an amendment, you know, I think
Yeah, it makes it easy.
appreciated.
It makes it easier.
Yeah.
But that's the fallback position is we go with amendment
Mm-hmm.
to one of the money bills.
I'd hate for us to do it, what's happened last week and force the bill off the wall onto the floor.
Well, that's why, exactly, I don't want to be responsible for putting our colleagues, you know, in that position to have to do that in any way, which it sounds like that wasn't the case with that bill, but you're bringing them here, which is
That's
very
right.
appreciated.
That's right. And I know the
Yeah.
tradition, that Pro Tem had raised, tradition of doing it in the proper way. Well, the proper way is for committee chair to not deal with it. That's not the proper way as far as I'm
Right.
concerned.
Right.
To the Pro Tem's defense, I think he made a good point that these things do take time. So if it's the end of the session or the end of the biennium, this thing
Well,
hasn't
this
taken
is-
up,
this-
then that's
this
a different
bill has
question. than
been-
doing that.
Out,
Yeah. Agreed.
Right.
for how many times over how many years and it's
Right.
been stuck in the same way
Yeah.
and we just cannot countenance letting it go again this year.
Right.
I agree.
And I have said to Democratic colleagues, you know, be prepared to negotiate. We have different numbers and some people don't have that muscle because it's been a while.
Mhm.
But, you know, especially in the Senate, but be prepared to negotiate in committee. So it's both sides, you know, saying, hey, let's in through the committee process, have hard discussions, that get us all to yes.
great. So, so tomorrow we'll go till 12:30. I just texted Edie and Mike to confirm that is both either has already been voted out of committee or is about to be. Patrick is working on our fiscal note. I think we're in good shape. And if you would like, I think it might be time for a break. And we have brownfield discussion with Mike O'Grady and Patrick and a whole slew of people. Let's see. Mike O'Grady and Matt Chapman in at 11 o'clock. No.
Back at
Not
11.
even by Zoom.
He was out of the state until yesterday.